So we're accredited to offer everything from associates through doctorates. We're institutionally accredited by COC. Our student demographics, we have about 2,800 students across all of our schools. Almost 70% of them are female students. The majority of our students are full-time students. We have very few part-time students. And 2/3 of them are pursuing graduate and professional degrees. Professional degrees is what we categorize the dental program, the medical degree, occupational therapy, physical therapy. All of those are considered professional degrees. So that's what the majority of our students are in. And then the other third is in bachelor's or associates. The majority of our bachelors are in our nursing program. Excuse me. So as I mentioned, we are institutionally accredited by SACS. In addition to that, 33 of our programs have individual accreditation through professional bodies, which has really been a resource when we're looking at assessments, and I'll mention that in a bit.
All right, thank you so much. It's always helpful to have the context a little bit of your school. Each school is unique, and so it's nice to know like what the particular hurdles are that you all face. And so I wanted to kind of use a metaphor of a marathon as we talk through the work that you're doing at LSU. And so if we think about back when you started in your role at this institution, and maybe tell a little bit about what things were like when you got started and what was the situation with assessment and accreditation as you jumped into your role there.
Sure. So I've been in this position since 2019. I've been here at the university since 2003, but in this position since 2019. And I am the first person who ever had this position. So we did not have an institutional effectiveness office before. Our previous accreditation site visit was sort of slapped together by various people. And I think institutionally we realized that's not going to work going forward. So when I came in, I sort of inherited not any sort of processes. Institutionally, a lot of our processes, not just assessment and accreditation, are decentralized. So each of the schools sort of do things their own way. There was nothing being done from an institutional standpoint. Some schools had very, very robust assessment activities, had quality improvement, were publishing reports. Some of them did none at all. Just none. There's no other way to say it. But what we did have, aside from one of our schools, which is very quality driven, was really just anecdotal things like, are students able to do this? Yes, we've noticed that, we've observed that students can do a physical exam. Okay, how many are, or what is our goal? There was no data. It's just, yes, they're doing it. So we sort of have what I call a good problem. As a professional school, we have very high achieving students. Our completion rates are almost near 100% in every program. So it's sort of bred this complacency that if everything is fine, why do we need to be assessing? What do we need to improve? Everybody's 100%. Our test rates are 98%. Our completion rates are 100%. And that's sort of what I walked into. And at the time, as I mentioned, we're accredited by COC. Our 5th year report was due, and we submitted sort of this anecdotal assessment narrative, and it's not shocking, we were non-compliant. So it was really eye-opening. When I wrote that, I didn't expect we were going to be compliant, honestly. Actually, I don't even think we said we were compliant. I think we said partially compliant, and thought maybe they'll look on us with grace, but no. So it wasn't what I found when I came in. It really was in no place a good system.
Okay. And I appreciate you using that language and saying it wasn't a good system, because that doesn't mean that there weren't good things happening. And like you said, anecdotally, you could tell some stories, but really this process of accreditation requires documentation of that. And it requires some little bit, harder proofs to say, this is why we know, this is how we know these things that we're claiming. So as we were talking and planning for this, I really liked when you said we quickly realized we needed a plan. So tell us a little bit about the problems that you were trying to solve and the challenges that you faced as you started to think through this assessment plan.
So yeah, basically almost before we submitted that 5th-year report, I was telling our Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, we don't have what we need. We need to have something that every school can duplicate, that we can report consistently for every program. And obviously, I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. You know, every SACS accredited, for the least, school has to do this. So I really, I didn't want to start from scratch. I didn't want to spend all my time doing that. So I really did rely on the kindness of my colleagues. And I think that's something that, in my experience, at least, I've really appreciated, that we're all sort of in the same boat. And, you know, if I've already created something and you can benefit it, then I'd love to share that with you. And I've had that experience across the board. Colleagues that I've met at annual meetings or in Weave trainings or at message boards, either way, like, people have been very kind in sharing things. And that was really a good start for me. Of course, I needed to tweak it a little because, you know, general ed or an undergrad school, we're not going to look at things the same way, but the bones of it were there. So that was something that I would definitely recommend. I really would be shocked if somebody told you, no, I won't share that. One of my colleagues was like, I'll give you the password to the back end. I'm like, no, don't do that. I don't want to have that kind of access. Just share what you can. So that was one thing. The second thing, and this is a hashtag not sponsored, but I did, as Sherry mentioned, take the Weave Academy course for Introduction to Effective Assessment Practices. I did not have assessment experience before taking this job. So I was all about learning everything I could. And that class, again, nobody's paying me to say this, but it really was hands-on, even more so than I thought. So like, we worked through each step of an assessment plan, and that really helped me kind of break it down into small pieces, which is always the best way to handle any kind of giant project. And again, we're, you know, bouncing ideas off of colleagues who were in that course helped. We all came from different kinds of institutions, but fundamentally assessment, you know, is the same. It's just what your topic is. So that was really valuable. So then I took all those resources and I started to develop and this assessment tool that we ended up using. And what I can stress is that it was never, I never feel like it's done. Like, I'm constantly revising it, refining it as we use it. How can we refine it to better get across what we're asking? So that's something that, you know, we're constantly updating. Institutionally, my next step was getting, you know, people on board, especially in the schools that weren't doing this. I had meetings with every school. Of course, they were like, "Oh, we're doing that." I'm like, "Really? That's awesome. Send me your data." And there was no data. They weren't doing it. What they thought they were doing was, you know, like, "Oh yeah, students are graduating. We're good." And I'm like, "No, that's not going to be enough." So it's a slow process. Getting across, we're not doing this. I'll be honest, we are still in the we're doing this because we have to phase. And moving them from that is a slow walk. I did training webinars with each of the program directors, with academic deans, to literally like, let's do, like, fill out this matrix on the assessment tool we did. This is what I would put here. This is, so I did that. I did a lot of those just to show them, you know, I know it's foreign, but it's not hard. It's not, you know, it's not, you know, crazy. How to develop student learning outcomes and measures. We went over some of that stuff in webinars. And again, like, really stressing, we need data. We need you to collect the data and we need you to analyze it. That is and continues to be the missing piece, the analysis of the data and what are we going to do with it? Because again, it's foreign to most of our programs.
Okay, thank you. So I really appreciate the comments in there about the kindness of colleagues, because I think that that's been my experience as well. And I don't know that I've ever said to anyone, hey, will you share what you're doing in this space? It seems that people are so willing to share their experiences. So here's the interesting part. So you did an enormous amount of work and got through that first cycle, and then kind of took a step back and said, okay, let's take stock of what happened. And so talk a little bit about what happened at the end of that first cycle.
So the first cycle, I was hopeful, but realistic, and I'd like to think we were going to get better than what we did, and what we got wasn't great, honestly. I was like, well, I showed them what to do, and I told them how to do it, but we got a lot of things like measures that didn't match student learning outcomes. So if the outcome was students would be able to do a physical exam, and the measure was a written paper, and I'm like, that's in a grade on a written paper, and I'm like, I don't even know. So there was things like that, or really spotty data, like we'd have 3 measures, but we'd only have outcome data on one of them. The biggest thing, no changes needed, all good. Okay, oh, we're 100%, we're gonna continue to monitor. We get a lot of that. And partly it's because, like I said, we have very high achieving students. So if the outcome is, students complete program, or students exit exams or licensure exams, they're all at 100%. And I'm like, that is fantastic. Find another outcome that we do need to improve. We can't have 5 outcomes that are all 100%. No changes needed. We had a lot of those. Or when the ones that did get data, there was no analysis, or no, we didn't meet the target and this is what we're going to do, or we didn't meet the target and this is how we got there. There was really not a lot of analysis, and that is the missing part that we've really tried to focus on.
Okay, so I like your honesty here. I appreciate so much, and I'm hoping other people on the call can appreciate the fact that really assessment and accreditation is not about getting it all right the first time. That's not the purpose. And so your willingness to say, nope, we didn't quite meet what we were hoping to with this first effort. And even if people were saying that they met the targets, we still knew we had room for improvement. So I'm continuing our metaphor, thinking this as a marathon. And so after that, I know you didn't just throw in the towel and say, never mind, assessment doesn't matter. So tell us a little bit about persevering through those challenges at the end of the first cycle.
Sure. So we didn't, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We went back to each program, to each academic dean, and really tried to get down to where were they. Every school kind of was struggling differently. Some people had no data, some people had no analysis. Some of them had a really difficult time creating objectives. This was one of the resources that was helpful. So for the programs that have their own accreditation, they almost always have very similar requests. So we recommended go back, look at with your, sometimes they haven't been reaccredited in a couple of years, so it's not top of mind. When we say, well, go back and look at what they're asking you to meet. Or does your accreditation body have a competency that your students must meet? That's a good starting place for student learning outcomes. So that was helpful. When we were looking at targets, again, everybody thought, well, I have to get an A++ 100, right? I need to come up with a target. So I'm going to make an artificially low target. So that way I'm definitely going to 100% reach it. And we had to get across to them that the point isn't to get an A++ 100. The point is to show that we have a goal. And if we met it, that's fantastic. What do we do to meet it? And if we didn't meet it, you're not failing. You're working to revise your plan to improve. So that has been that's been a challenge to get across, because they definitely all want to be 100%. No changes needed. And then in the action plan, which again we said was our biggest gap, we challenged them to think, a lot of them thought, well, this is new work. I have to come up with an action plan. And we said, well, you're probably already doing these things. You're just not connecting them. So if your student learning outcome is that a student will, be able to competently present at a seminar, and they haven't, you didn't meet your goal. Only 2/3 of them did, and your goal was 100%. Well, your faculty is probably already in there helping them revise their presentations, work on their presentation skills. So you're probably already doing the things that are the action plan to reach the outcome, but you're not connecting them. So we really challenge them to think of it like that. We're not talking about do something new. In some instances, it was adding new things on, or adding additional study groups or additional training. But a lot of times, you're really already doing these things if you're not reaching the target, because that's part of education. You're already helping the students to get where they need to be. So that was a way that we were help them to connect, to not feel like, oh, there's all this new stuff I have to do. So we did a second cycle of assessment. Still, we're not 100% great, but it was a significant improvement on where we were. We had better analysis, more consistent data. Almost all, I think by the time we submitted it, all of our measures made sense with our student learning outcomes. So I am confident. We just submitted our referral report to SACS that asked for clarification on that. We just submitted it April 1st. So I'm hopeful that the changes we made, and I'll be honest, we only have 2 assessment cycles. So we don't have years of data. And so they still might not, say, they might say, we think you're on the right track, but let's keep a look on this. I suspect that might be the case. But I don't think they're going to find this fully non-compliant, because we do have a system in place now. And we have plans moving forward.
Wonderful. Well, we will want to know the outcome of that for you all eventually. I'm sure you'll keep us posted. So in a minute, so Christine's going to talk to us a little bit about what's next for them. And then we're going to have a couple of minutes for some questions. So if you are thinking of those questions now, you can kind of start processing a little bit, put some things in the chat or the Q&A for Christine. Did I just say Melissa? I said the wrong name, didn't I? It's for Christine. So tell us a little bit then about what's coming up next. Like, obviously you haven't crossed the finish line, right? And that's the thing about assessment is, like, even when we do sort of cross the finish line with some measures that we are measuring, we're still looking for then other pieces and ways to improve. So tell us a little bit about what's coming up on the horizon for you and what's next.
Sure. So like I say here, we're not where we need to be, but we are so much closer than where we started. And I'm really happy about that, because we have put in a lot of work to get where we are. My goal is to move us institutionally from a we have to do this to a we want to do this. It's a challenge of, well, if everything's fine, why do we have to do this? To get people to value the data and the that they get from assessments, that they can improve student learning. I think I said this when I took the WEAVE course. There's a joke that says, what do you call how does it go? What do you call the person who's last in their class in medical school? They're a doctor. So somebody's going to be like, but there's always better. There's always improvement. We always want to get, our students. We don't just want to make doctors. We want to make great doctors. We don't just want to make nurses. We want to make great nurses. So how can they're all graduating, but how can we teach them better? How can they learn better? And really, again, it's from an institutional mindset that we're working on of, we're not doing this because we have to, because SAC says we need to, because if we don't, we're going to go on probation. We're doing this because it's to the benefit of our students. We can teach them better. They'll become better professionals. And, that's our mission, to produce healthcare professionals for our state. So we're not there yet. We are close, or we're closer than we were, but we're not there yet. And that's where we are. I'm working, to sort of develop some faculty champions, faculty members who really get it, who can speak, on a day-to-day basis on the ground, so to speak, in their departments, in their programs. So it's not coming from a top-down academic affairs says you have to do this, but, we're colleagues, and let me tell you why I think this is great. So that's something that I'm working on this summer to develop those faculty champions. I'm hopeful that'll help.
Wonderful. We do have we've got some comments and questions coming in. So the first one is from Tamika Grant, and she said, what software have you found to be helpful in preparing for accreditation reporting?
We use Weave software. So that's what we had when I came in, and that's what we still use.
Yeah. And like Christine and Melissa both mentioned, this is not, we're not necessarily trying to make a commercial for Weave, but it does just so happen that both of these institutions use Weave and have used it successfully. And so we're always happy to answer questions about that for folks, because we do think we have a great solution that folks can use. But also, like Christine said, all of these things that make for good assessment are just part of good assessment work. So there was a nice comment in the chat as well, Christine, from Tammy Mize, and she said, changing the mindset of those that assess is a huge step in the right direction. Kudos for working to change the culture. So that's good. So I'll give another minute just for a couple of other questions before we change tack here. I was going to ask a question. So I know that you said a couple slides back, one of those early efforts that you took was meeting with various departments. And so I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about the practicality of that. Were those mandatory? Did you meet with groups from each of the schools, or just one person to try and sow that seed? And maybe you just talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I met with, I started with the academic deans from every school, and I met with them as a group, as a whole. So we would all be on the same page. I didn't want to meet with them individually because it's sort of repetitious, and it's beneficial if, we're all sort of doing the same work. I wanted everyone to hear it. So I met with them as a group. And then in each school, I met with the program directors. And most of the schools have multiple programs aside from medicine, which is just medicine. So oftentimes it was like 6 to 10 people, and often the dean of the school was there, which I was happy to have, that support. And again, even though their programs are different, I wanted them to understand that probably most of your questions are going to be the same. Where, it's not really assessing occupational therapy, and physical therapy is not significantly different. The process is the same. Your outcomes are going to be different, but the process is the same. And I wanted to sort of have, again, when there were faculty who were more enthusiastic about it, I wanted other people to hear it, and to sort of be the cheerleader for when there was some who weren't enthusiastic about it. But I would definitely say meeting with them, having the dean of the school there, even if it's just a strong arm to say, this is important, we are going to do this. And again, true confession, we are still in the we have to do this phase. I don't know how long it'll take us to get to the we want to do this. I hope sooner rather than later, but I think it'll be interesting. We have 2.5 years before our next reporting is due to SACS. And so we are going to be working. And I think in the past, we kind of took time off between SACS reports and didn't do anything. So I'm hopeful that as we work during what used to be off time for SACS, they see like, oh, this is not an every 5 years thing. Like, this is going to be an every year thing. And again, as we get some of the analysis back and they really see, okay, we can use this, I'm hopeful that, that mindset will move in the right direction.
Wonderful. Thank you. That one of the things that we find so often is that one-on-one time, especially at the beginning, or one with a small group time, it seems like it's a drain on time, but actually in the end, it pays off. So you kind of slow down at the beginning in order to hurry up and make better progress as time goes on, and it's worthwhile. So thank you for that. Our presenters today have agreed that they're happy to share resources So I have Christine's email address here on the slide if you have some further questions and want to reach out to her. And we will have an opportunity for some more Q&A later on. So if you have questions that you didn't quite get to put out there, never fear, we'll come back to those. But we are going to switch tack just a little bit now and talk to Melissa Pierce about the University of South Alabama College of Medicine. So she's going to give a little context and overview about her school, and then we'll hear some story that is a little bit more focused on the accreditation piece and specifically CQI.
Thank you. I didn't realize how many parallels Christine and I have in our from how long we've been in our positions to our positions being started from scratch based on a need that was out there. I mean, everything. It sounds like, and I'm sure this is across the board, we're all facing the same challenges when it comes to accreditation and assessment. And I think we all have the same barriers and obstacles. So this is a great opportunity to be able to share, because I'm sure Christine ran into some of the same problems that I did, as far as there's not a lot of information out there when you get started. So you basically are having to recreate the wheel in a lot of ways. And then some places you reach out to aren't as giving with their resources and the things that they've created. So that's one of the reasons I think that we're so happy to share with our experiences and the resources that we have now, because we want to make it a little bit easier across the board, because we're all in this together. So we are the University of South Alabama in itself is the largest employer for Mobile and Baldwin County in Alabama. And our College of Medicine is a little unique because we are smaller. So as far as quality improvement and the office that I'm in, when we started our CQI committee, there was a lot of questioning about, okay, what is this about? What's the overall purpose? And so we have really good leadership here, as far as we're not looking to just meet accreditation standards. We're training doctors. We need them to be the best of the best. These are the healers. These are the researchers. These are the people that are going to find answers. And we want to help our community, because we're a state university. We focus a lot on our students here in the state. So we are, we're always looking for diversity, and we're always, trying to do a holistic approach to this. So we want to be better. We want to always improve the quality. And yes, it's great to meet all of your accreditation standards, but there's always more that we can do. A lot of times they will tell you what they would like you to do, but then you have to figure out what process is going to work best for you and how that needs to happen so that you can go beyond what you're even doing now. So it is a change in the mindset from have to want to. And luckily we have the leadership that is very supportive of that here.
That's wonderful. And I think that we got that impression from Christine's conversation too. And it really is like having the high level support and the mid-level support is key to that. So if you will, tell us a little bit, you mentioned this in your preview there a little bit, just about being a small school and maybe some of the unique challenges that presents as you are approaching accreditation and addressing the CQI requirement.
Well, there's 93 elements that you have to monitor. And when you are a smaller school, that means you have less faculty and administration, which means we all wear a lot of hats. And we have a lot of directors for our courses. And for them to have tenure, they also have research requirements of things that they have to do. They serve on numerous committees. So when we're putting something together like, CQI and continuous quality improvement, we don't want to overtax them. The same with assessment. They've done a great job of creating the objectives that align with the sessions and the courses and go all the way up to alignment with LCME standards and our strategic plan. But we've got to get past that, and we've got to have the method of how we're going to find that, and then how we're going to get the data. And then we've got fantastic data officer in my department, but we have to have the data so we can analyze it, so we can compare it and then say, okay, we're doing great on this. What if we tweak this? Because we're always wanting to improve. So it's the same with, quality improvement and CQI. It's hard being a smaller institution because you have less staff. But again, we have the leadership here that we've been able to say, okay, we feel that we have a need here. And they're very open to doing what we need to do to try to better what we're doing and meet the goals that we're trying to meet. And we're currently in the process of revising our strategic plan. So I'm sure the CQI committee will be heavily involved in that part. And that's going to be a really good thing. I'm excited about that because, again, we're going from have to want to, and to be the best. We want to be leaders. And 93 elements is a lot to monitor. So being a small group, you have to be very organized on figuring that out. And I'll go into that process a little bit later. But when it comes to medical students, we only admit 74 a year, which means we know our students, very well. And we're all invested. So if they're struggling, you're going to be giving them the extra attention and trying to find the resources that they need to do that. But yet again, there's another hat somebody's got to wear and another responsibility that you've got to do. So being a smaller school, it can be very challenging in that. It's great because we all know each other, the faculty and the staff and the students, they know everyone. They know that they're invested in their education and their success. But, it's challenging. It's a heavy load to lift.
Very much so. And I understand that completely from my personal experience as well at a very small institution, that the thing about the multiple hats and trying to address. And so I can remember having the conversation and saying, we have to meet all the same standards that a school with 1,000 faculty members has to meet, or 500 faculty members. And yet we have, 50. And so we have to do this, all the same work. And it just has to be scalable, in the micro sense, and it has to be sustainable for that small pool of people addressing that. So if you would talk a little, and this won't be anything that's new to the folks who are on this call who are from medical sciences schools, but tell us a little bit about LCME and the CQI history so we have a little context.
Okay. Well, in 2015, they added continuous quality improvement as part of the LCME standard 1.1. But of course, everything is not spelled out. So they want to make sure you have a process. Coming up with that process is on you. So you've got to figure out what's going to be the best process, how you're going to measure that process, what exactly it's going to be. And we had our site visit in 2018, and we had started the process of the continuous quality improvement, but formalizing the process was a little bit of a different story. So and we learned a lot in 2018. That was when we had our site visit, and it was coming up. And that's also when they determined that we probably need a full-time position that actually focuses on that, which is where I come into play a few months later. But after putting together taking as taxing as it was with everybody wearing all the different hats and then having to focus on something that is so important to continue to have a medical school, and everyone is having to come together and write this, 3-inch binder thick worth of, a DCI document and keep track of it. It was determined that, hey, okay, so we probably need to hire somebody for this, and let's figure out a better process. So that is when in 2019, we started formalizing the process a little bit more with determining how that was going to start, what the actual pieces and everything, how that was going to work, and who was all going to be in the committee.
Okay, and you're going to tell us about that piece next. One of the things that I like about this, kind of some similarity between Christine's story with LSU and your story, is that none of this happened overnight. It wasn't like the institution realized we need to pay closer attention to assessment or accreditation. We'll hire somebody and they'll fix it in 30 days. That's just not the reality for any of this type of work. So it's nice to hear the stories of how an intentional plan is carried out over a number of years. So tell us a little bit about the composition of your committee.
This is one of the things that I really like. I feel like the way that we have our committee set up, we have so much expertise and knowledge, and it's just across the board. And so we have several standing committees, admission, curriculum, graduate medical education, all of those different pieces. Every chair of those committees is on our CQI committee. So again, it's an extra hat that they're wearing, but it's a very important one because they bring all the expertise of what they're doing in their committee to our table. And then we have 4 that are appointed by the dean, and then 4 that are appointed by faculty assembly. So most of the time, those are faculty members and staff that have expressed an interest in being part of the group. And of course, it can help your CV and being a part of a group like that. So we try to market it as being, we want to make it as easy as possible for each of our committee members. And I'll get into that process a little bit more. So we're trying to get the reputation where we want all the best and the brightest to come, even if they're not a chair of a department, because a lot of times the chair of the department, they've been around for a little while, but then when you get people that are interested, they can be the new people that have just come on and they've just graduated and they're energetic and they have all these ideas and, they're ready to create change and make a difference. So it's nice to have that mix. One of the things I feel like is probably particularly unique is that we have students in our CQI committee as well. We have one from each medical year. So we have, med year 1, med year 2, 3, and 4, and then we have one from our PhD program. So we have that across the board. Then that way they're always involved. So if we're getting ready to roll out or we're wondering about something, we have student input as well. And they're pretty active, that they attend on a regular basis and they're part of the review team. When we get ready to go over a standard. And so that's really, I feel like we've got a great mix of expertise, and it's very diverse on experiences, and it works well. And then of course it's the Office of Accreditation and Planning, because that is where my position lies, and then also the data officer and then the associate dean of the department. So we're all in there together, and it's a really, really great mix.
Right. I love hearing that the story of including students on this committee, and it's something that's a topic kind of it's high on everyone's interest list right now, thinking about how to include students in assessment and accreditation processes, not just as like read this report that we've already written and tell us if we got it right, but really actually having a hand in creating their educational opportunities and speaking into how we design what they experience all the way through their program. So I love that story of that. So tell us a little bit, you said you'd tell us a little bit about the practicality of managing the CQI process. And I like the attention that you're paying here to those people who are on that committee and how to keep them involved and wanting to participate.
Well, and one of the things you mentioned earlier is it's always a growing and evolving process. And I want to say almost probably after every committee meeting, we have figured out a way that we should tweak it a little bit more to make things work. So we are continuously improving the quality every month on even what we're doing for the CQI committee in our process. But the first step that we do is we take all of the 93 elements, they're broken down into 12 standards. So we have 12 months out of the year that we're going to have committee meetings. And then we also have our strategic plan priorities. So what we do is we divide each month gets a certain standard along with a couple of pieces of our strategic plan. Most of the time, whichever pieces of the strategic plan align the best with those standards that we're reviewing, because that makes it easier when we pass the information to the stakeholders for updates. So we have that where we're going to review those pieces once a month. I have a very detailed spreadsheet. One of the challenges is that because of the way everything is spread out, you constantly have pieces of several standards floating around out there where you're waiting for updates or you're getting ready to present them at a meeting. So that's still definitely a work in progress that I'm trying to nail down a little bit better. But so the first piece is that we have those standards separated. We send those out to the stakeholders. What I do is I compare last year's LCME DCI along with their most current year, the one that they've just released. And we go through and we mark each of them to say whether they've been revised, whether they're the same, or whether they're new. And we mark that on each of that. So when I send out the stakeholders, they have got the newest version of what's required by LCME for this year, because that's what we're going to do for the review cycle. So in theory, at the end of the year, we've got a DCI ready to print and go, and we're not scrambling at any point because we always have the information updated and ready to go with the most recent requirements. So we send those out to the stakeholders, they respond, and then we have a section, we have each of our committee members assigned to a month. So there will be 2 or 3 for each month, and those are considered our review team. When we get the stakeholder responses back, we send them to the review team. They go through with a fine-tooth comb, and then there's a section that we've built in there that says comments or recommendations. So they'll go through and they'll add what their comments or recommendations are for. That's going to be what they present when we have our committee meeting. But when we get those, if it's something that needs clarification from the stakeholder, or if it's additional information, we can send that back before our meeting and get the information. So sometimes there's less that we have to discuss when we're at the meeting. Then I take those comments and we add them to a PowerPoint presentation. And that's what we go over at the committee meeting. We're going over, okay, these are the new pieces and these are all of the recommendations or comments that we have. We get input from the whole rest of the committee on how they feel about that. And again, when you have different pieces with so many different experts and people with different experiences, and they're being parsed out, you get completely different comments, and because we want them to be able to look at that with fresh eyes. We want them to be able to go through and say, okay, I'm reading the stakeholder response. It doesn't quite make sense. We have tweaked that even more so now because we have the LCME, how they review it. So everything that they've released this year on the review cycle, we're going to tweak it and we're going to send it out and say, okay, look at it as the LCME reviewers do. So not just as a fresh set of eyes and what something that doesn't make sense. They're going to judge us based on this, look at it as if you were a reviewer and apply that to as you look at it. And then we meet about it, we have the minutes and we keep up with it. And then I enter everything in Weave. I have 2 different places that I enter it in there. One is, okay, we went over this month and these were all the comments we have. And then I put everything in our full DCI accreditation document. So at any point, we have everything there with all the appendices, all the tables, everything. So that has been, and again, when we started, one of the things we went was to look and see what software and what way we thought was going to be the best way to track it. So that's basically our process in a nutshell, and we are constantly tweaking bits and pieces of it every month when we have a meeting or when something new comes out and we have more information.
So I'm fascinated. I'm looking at this little simple chart that I made here, which is like a lie because it's such a detailed and complex process. This just captures the high level pieces of it, but you have such a detailed, organized process that seems like, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, the spreadsheet looks more like this.
Yeah. So very sustainable. But one of the things that I keep hearing you say in there is the need for not only a manageable CQI process, but also a way to assess the CQI process itself, this idea of meta assessment and making sure that the method and process that you're using is helpful. And so it's important to build those into assessment cycles as well. So you've been doing this for a little while. And sounds like that you've had some good successes. You've learned to tweak some things. So we'll take just a minute and hear about lessons learned and next steps. And then I see there's some questions popping up. So we'll have some Q&A after this next little bit.
I would say one of the biggest things that we want to make it easier for, we have learned a lot. We have crashed and burned on a couple of pieces, and we have revamped the way we've done it because of that. The way we were doing it before seemed extremely confusing to our review team on the CQI committee. So we've tried to make that as easy as possible, which is why I compare the documents for the year. And then we go ahead and get the stakeholder responses. Before, we were giving them both the documents and saying, okay, you compare it, see what's different, then you send it to the stakeholders and you get their responses. That was just too much. They're already taxed with enough. It was just, but we wanted to avoid rubber stamping. So we don't want to just check off a box either. We don't want to make it so easy where they're just doing a simple review of it and not really giving any input. So there's a delicate balance. And that's one of the reasons why we've had to adjust and change from what. One of the main things we decided to do this year is when we start on our next review cycle, we've adjusted the method, the order that we do. The first year when we started, we went by the items that the LCME tasked us with, saying that it needed monitoring or we needed to make some adjustments. So we put those at the top of the list. Those were the ones that we hit hard and heavy in the first couple of months. And then we decided, okay, now that we've got that under control, let's just take them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll just take them in numerical order. We'll make it easy. We'll go through that way. Well, that doesn't necessarily work for your stakeholders, because if you've got somebody that's getting ready for a white coat ceremony and that happens to be the month you need all their input from their stakeholders, that's just not feasible. That's too much on them as well. So we've tried to change how we're reviewing them in the months we're reviewing them now to coincide with what works best with their schedule, which I think is going to be a really good improvement for this next review cycle. One of the most important things I think that we have learned is that our CQI committee needs to know why the work matters, because the first year we would get their input and then it didn't really go anywhere. So we learned, okay, well, we've got to send it to the stakeholders and say, these were the recommendations, or what can you do? Is there stuff that you can tweak? Is there some kind of PDA cycle we're going to have to do? Do we need a subcommittee to figure out? Because there are some little issues and then there are some big issues that require a lot. And we have created subcommittees and we have done PDSA cycles on certain pieces of it. And, that continues to work well. But you just have to make sure that they know their piece is important, because before they're like, well, what are we really doing here? So now this year, what we'll do in our final meeting at the review cycle is say, okay, these are all the things we found this year, and this is the work, and this is how you've made a difference in that, because we want them to be an active part of the committee and we want them to know why it matters, because we want that buy-in, because we're going to have to roll out some more harder assessment work soon. So they need to know that we're on their side and that it is important work that we're doing.
Trying to find my mute button there. Thank you. Yeah. So I love that. It's like trying to say the same thing that we say to our students about, but assessment matters. We actually use this information. We know it's a lot of hard work, but we actually use this information to make the process better. And that has to be a part of what we pay attention to when we're leading assessment and accreditation work with our faculty and staff as well. So thank you for that as well. So we do have a couple of questions are popping up, and for the rest of you on the call here, go ahead and think through those questions, put them in the chat or the Q&A. There was one that came in right as Christine was wrapping up her section. And so I'm not sure if this was more directed at her, but I think really both of you could probably weigh in on this. So Anne Hotop, I think, said, how many people are on your institutional effectiveness team? You can't be doing all this work alone. Can you describe your org chart just a little bit? So we'll let Christine respond and then Melissa respond to that same question.
I lead a robust team of me, Like I said, this position did not exist prior to 2019. I am in the process actually trying to hire an assessment person who will be 100% dedicated to assessment. And then I would focus more on the accreditation and program review piece. But right now I'm doing it all.
All right. I mean, that's the way it is sometimes. Melissa, how about you all?
I wish I had the statistics to know how different of a size of school that we are overall. We have an institutional effectiveness office as well, not in the College of Medicine. In the College of Medicine, we are the Office of Accreditation and Planning, and there are 3 of us total right now, and possibly we're going to be increasing that as well, because again, like I said, you know, we're able to identify the needs, and we've got the leadership that backs us up when we say we need more.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. So I
can say, I'm sorry, in our schools, there are people who work on their program accreditation. They're probably not full-time doing that job, but so I don't do individual program accreditations. I just do our institutional accreditation and then our assessments. So
good. Thanks for that. That's good clarification to have. So I think it's just not unusual to be an office of one or even an office of a half in some cases. And those who are fortunate to have a small staff doing IE work, what a blessing that is, but it's not always the case. So it makes it all the more important to, again, make these processes sustainable. It has to be something that can be carried out year over year over year without, sacrificing somebody to the altar of accreditation. So it has to be sustainable. So there was another comment in the Q&A that I will just respond to quickly, a question about the accreditation. The certification that both Christine and Melissa mentioned as they took Weave Academy courses. And we do have a program for certified assessment practitioners and certified assessment specialists. We have a series of courses, and then we have workshops that we run frequently. If you're interested in any of that, you can scan the QR code here. Excuse me, it's the allergy thing as well. That will take you to a landing page where you can sign up to receive more information about both Weave Connections, which is our monthly newsletter, as well as access to other ongoing events. And you can also go to our Weave Knowledge Center and just click on the link for Weave Academy, and that'll take you to information about upcoming courses and workshops. I did want to mention quickly 2 specific workshops that we have coming up in the month of May. So hopefully right after graduation is wrapped up and you've got some time before you leave for the summer, we have Linda Susky partnering with us to do a workshop on curriculum mapping. So if that's something that your institution is wanting to tackle, that'll be a 2-hour hands-on. She does a really wonderful job, gives some information, but also some tools and some practice for practical use of curriculum maps, and then another one on assessing general education. So maybe not necessarily for everyone on this call in the health sciences, but if you know someone else or if you know your institution is getting ready to do a gen ed overhaul and could use some practical, again, hands-on tools to help with gen ed assessment. Both of those are coming up. We still have a few seats open in each one, and you can, again, find out more information about that at the Weave Knowledge Center. So I think we captured all the questions in the chat there. And so with that, I would like to offer my sincere thanks to Christine and Melissa for taking time out, especially this very busy time of year, to put together some really helpful tips for how to make assessment and accreditation manageable in health sciences. We appreciate your expertise and appreciate all of you who took time out of your day to come and join us. And we will be sending out a recording at the end of this. You'll receive something from Jordan Denton, who is my cohort and superwoman here at Weave, and she helps manage all of those things. And so you'll get a recording of this. I see Tim Gilbert raising his hand, and I think that he's just like raising his hand and saying, way to go, Melissa. So thank you again, and hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. We'll see you again at the next Weave event.